Hello! In this video we'll be taking a look at 3Do, the completely free PBR renderer and GPU baker included in Suite 2.0. 3Do is completely integrated with the Suite, but can also be used as standalone. It can be used to preview any type of project, not just projects created within the Suite. We'll be covering all you need to know to get started with 3Do and to create great looking renders and animations. In this video I'll go over how I set the scene up and show you how to render out animations like the ones you just saw. There are three different parts of 3Do. Options, where you access all rendering and post-processing settings. Baking, where you access the real-time GPU bakers. And import, where you import your meshes and textures. Let's start off by taking a closer look at the Options tab and try and recreate the result I showed you before. First off, let's decide on a skybox. You can toggle between them by pressing the arrow keys left and right, or by opening the skybox selection menu. I'm a big fan of the first skybox, I just need to tweak it a bit. I'll start off by increasing the light just a little bit by adjusting the light intensity slider. Next, we have the option to use a headlight. This is great, for example, when you're painting and want good light wherever you look, or for certain renders where you want a full-on light. For this render, I'll leave it off. You can also enable light spin, which is nice when you just want to sit back and see the light play on your surfaces. I'm happy with base lighting. Let's take a look at the other options here. In this menu you can toggle between different primitives and the mesh specified in the base creator. Here you can create a turntable by enabling turntable and specifying a custom rotation speed in each axis. Next, you have the backdrop options. You can toggle between a solid color backdrop or a blurred sky backdrop. I'll set mine to be a solid backdrop and increase the brightness quite a bit. Here you have the shading dropdown. You can toggle between the maps you want to preview by selecting them in the list or by pressing the numerical keys on the keyboard. In the camera menu you can create new cameras, load saved cameras from the list, save the current camera and delete them. You can also toggle between the saved cameras by using the numpad keys 1 through 9. The saved cameras have post-processes saved along with them, so you can easily jump between different settings for your renders and when working. Lastly, we have the render menu. Here you can save out renders at any resolution, and you can also enable the animation toolset. Let's take a look at the post-process menu. First off, we're presented with a list of post-process presets. Any presets you create can also be saved here for later use. You can create a new preset, save or delete the current one by using the buttons to the right. By checking only load post processes, 3Do will disregard the saved skybox, light settings and so on, and will only load the post processes associated with the preset. By default, Force High Quality Viewport is disabled, leading to a smoother frame rate, but at the cost of the quality being slightly reduced when navigating the 3D space. This option can also be toggled by pressing H on your keyboard. Next, we have three different anti-aliasing settings. All three can be enabled at the same time, but feel free to choose what suits you best. Following that, we have two different sharpness passes, pre-pass and post-pass. These can be adjusted independently of each other. Pre-pass sharpening is applied before all other post-processes, and post-pass is applied after all other post-processes. The next segment contains Screen Space Ambient Occlusion, or SSAO for short. By checking the checkbox, the parameters are exposed. Let's take a look at them. Intensity controls the overall intensity or the strength of the SSAO. To help make it easier to work with SSAO and get the result you're after, make sure to check Visualize SSAO. Radius controls the spread. A lower value means a tighter spread, and a higher value, a higher spread. The next checkbox, when checked, reveals a huge number of interesting post-processes. Let's check Simulate Physical Camera. This reveals several new parameters trying to emulate physical cameras and lenses with effects such as depth of field, vignetting, chromatic aberration, CCD blooming, and color grading. We'll set up depth of field later when animating, but let's take a look at what the different settings do by adjusting them. If you've done some photography, these parameters should feel familiar. By default, the camera will focus on the point of the mesh the camera rotates around, so by holding Alt and clicking the left mouse button, the focus point will change to that location. Let's disable depth of field for now and set up some of the other post processes. Vignetting allows you to create sort of a halo around the viewport. This can be very useful to help frame what you're rendering. Chromatic aberration is an emulation of a camera error. It fringes colors along boundaries to separate dark and bright parts of the image. CCD blooming emulates camera sensor blooming and allows you to adjust intensity, exposure, range, and white point. Next, I'll load a color lookup table to get some nicer contrast and better colors. Note that you can also step through color grading presets with the up and down arrow keys. Let's use the first option. I'll quickly tone down the solid backdrop brightness now that I've increased the blooming a bit. I'll also update the lighting direction slightly to make the metals pop more. Lens flaring contains 4 groups of lens effects: lens flare, anamorphic lens flare, or also known as J.J. Abrams lens flare, star lens flare, and lens dirt. The lens flares are quite expensive, and I prefer to leave them off while working and only enable them before rendering. The effects under lens and CCD defects emulates camera issues and defects, such as sensor noise or ISO grain and lens stains. Let's add a little bit of both, but nothing over the top. I usually like to increase the contrast very slightly, and depending on the project, reduce the saturation a bit. The values are quite sensitive, so work with small increments. I'll just tweak the values slightly before moving on. You rotate the skybox by holding Shift and right mouse button. You can also hold Shift, Control and right mouse button to rotate it in the up and down axis as well. That looks good. Let's take a look at animating our scene. You open up the Animator in the Render drop-down. The basic idea behind 3Do Animator is very simple. Everything you do per keyframe is stored there. So if you adjust the camera position, light rotation, or post processes, keyframe it and then change them in another keyframe, the values will interpolate between the 2 points. I'll start by creating a new shot. This will create a new blank timeline, allowing me to create a new animation. You can switch between previously created shots in the drop-down. In the top row of the animation toolbar, you can access controls and settings for navigating the timeline, output format, and frame rate, and so on. I'll create a keyframe. Let's start off by creating an animation where I animate the depth of field. I'll enable depth of field and adjust it so that it focuses on the back of the receiver. There we go. Let's update the keyframe by pressing the refresh icon. Next, I'll move the timeline marker to the end of the timeline, update the depth of field settings so that it focuses on the barrel instead, and then I'll create a new keyframe instead of updating an already existing one. There we go. Let's take a look at it. You can both scrobble through the timeline manually, or you can press the play icon. But first I want to animate the light slightly. Same thing here. Simply position the light where you want it, and then click the refresh icon on the keyframes you want to update. That looks cool. You can jump between the keyframes by using the previous and next keyframe buttons in the navigation bar. Let's disable depth of field and set up a camera animation. I'll create a new shot, position my camera and the light, and then create a keyframe. There we go. Let's set up the camera and light for the next keyframe as well. That looks good. Let's create a new keyframe. The camera movement is interpolated with an automatic ease in, ease out curve, whereas the lights and post processes are animated with linear curves. Let's render out this animation. You can save out animations as both image sequences and as an AVI. I'll go with AVI for this one. When you're ready, click the record button. This will prompt you with a file explorer. Simply specify where you want to save the video and press OK. Next, 3D will process the animation and save it out. There we go. Let's click Reveal in Explorer and take a look at it. I'm happy with that. Let's take a look at the Baking tab and what you can do there. The Baking tab allows you to bake out ambient occlusion, curvature, object space normals, and position gradient maps. Before baking, I'll make sure to have the correct mesh group selected. In order to bake, simply select any of the map types. And to bake ambient occlusion, you simply press the Bake button to the right. To mix in ambient occlusion generated from geometry, check the Geo AO checkbox. By using the sliders, you can adjust intensity, padding, and so on. Here, I'm reducing the intensity of the AO generated from geometry. For the other maps, the tweaks are rendered out almost instantly, making it super easy to see what the bakes will look like. Let's take a look at the final tab, Import. Here you can load any meshes and textures. It doesn't have to be a project generated with the suite. I'm loading the orc created for a previous video here by specifying the mesh and the correct input maps for each slot. The intensity of each map can be adjusted by using the corresponding sliders. I hope you learned something from this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.